Today we are here to announce a number of new initiatives in Prince George's County concerning domestic violence. We are all here today for one reason, and one reason only, and that is to stop the silence about domestic violence. Under the leadership of Prince George's County Executive Rushern Baker III, we needed to do more to curtail domestic violence in this county. We needed to enhance our resources and communicate to our citizens the resources that are available concerning all types of resources in our government. This initiative was not just about one or two agencies, but many county agencies that came together under the leadership of County Executive Baker. It showed that we care about people and about tackling and improving our resources to the citizens of Prince George's County. As a result of the county executive's leadership, the Prince George's County government put together a committee to examine this issue and to develop what we call viable solutions to deal with this serious problem of domestic violence. The committee included the county executive's office, Prince George's County Police Department, the state's attorney's office, Prince George's County Sheriff's Office, the Health Department, the Department of Social Services, and the Department of Family Services. This committee has been working on this issue since February 2013. We also collaborated with the Community Crisis Center to include their 211 call center that we believe will be a vocal point of this initiative. You will hear from Mr. Tim Jensen, Executive Director, later in the program. Before I introduce Police Chief Mark McGaul, let's recognize all the committee members. Would you please stand to be recognized, all the committee members that participated? Please stand. Let's give them all a round of applause. To me, this is what government should be about, helping our citizens. Before I call Chief McGaul up, could we also recognize Delegate Michael Summers? Michael Summers, thanks for coming. At this point, I want to introduce Police Chief Mark McGaul.
Well, thank you and good morning. To begin, I would like to thank County Executive Baker for bringing together all the county resources to address domestic violence. I'm pleased to report that overall violent crime is down 15% so far this year in the county. That's on top of an 8% drop in violent crime last year and a 12% drop in violent crime in 2012. Homicides continue to decline and are today significantly below last year's historic lows. But with about 13,000 domestic-related calls for service in 2012, we felt that it was critical to make sufficient structural changes to have a real impact on crime involving family members and intimate partners. This year, we've had 9 domestic-related homicides. Now, we've had 44 homicides this year to date. 9 of those domestic-related. 20% of the homicides in 2013 are domestic-related. We can change that. We want to prevent situations from escalating to that tragic point. The Prince George's County Police Department has dramatically overhauled the way we handle calls for service for domestic violence and investigations that follows. We have centralized the domestic violence unit and have dedicated a team of 15 specially trained investigators to focus specifically on domestic violence. Centralizing our domestic violence unit allows our investigators to examine all domestic calls for service, identify repeat calls, and more effectively allocate resources. This will help us protect and educate victims and ultimately reduce domestic violence one home at a time. Prevention is key, especially when it comes to domestic violence. We're working to stop the silence about domestic violence by removing victims from dangerous situations, by holding abusers accountable in the criminal justice system, by education of both the victim and the abuser, offering resources and or intervention, by simply helping the abused, female or male, rich or poor, young or old, to stop the silence. The answer to improving the lives of victims and preventing the violence from escalating will come not just from law enforcement or the county executive or the state's attorney. The answer, we believe, lies in the combined power of the entire government and all of our victim advocates in our community who work tirelessly to help those reaching out for support. Together we can and will reduce the domestic violence in Prince George's County. With that, I'd like to call to the podium my friend and partner in the fight against domestic violence, Sheriff High.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. On behalf of the members of the Office of the Sheriff, I'm happy to be here today with all of our partners in public safety. Although each of us has a distinct and specific role in public safety, in the Office of the Sheriff, we are clear that our best opportunity for a better, safer county is realized when we work together. Any day, like today, that we share information with the public that stops violence, saves lives, or tells citizens and residents where there's help and how to be safer is a good day. I think those of us who serve citizens every day get so busy doing the work we mistakenly assume that citizens are fully aware of what we do and how to access the resources and services we provide. That simply isn't always the case. And so this opportunity to talk about the 211 call center as a resource and partner in the battle against domestic violence is important. The 211 call center can put a citizen or resident on the right track when there is a risk of domestic violence. As longtime resources in domestic violence situations, the Office of the Sheriff comes into contact with victims in several ways. Sheriff's deputies serve all protective orders. That is the court order that tells one person to stay away from another. This may be the first legal record which indicates that a situation has escalated between intimate persons. These orders are time sensitive, and our goal is to serve them within hours of being issued. As our campaign copy indicates, silence is the biggest barrier in the fight against domestic violence. So while we may talk about the volume of protective orders, they really are a positive sign. What they mean to us in the Sheriff's Office is that a victim or someone who may be fearful of becoming a victim of domestic violence has taken action. The 211 call center can direct a citizen to the court commissioners or directly to our special victims assistants at the headquarters, at our Upper Marlboro, and here at our Hyattsville courthouses. Our pilot with the police department, in which the sheriff's deputies respond to 911 emergency domestic violence calls in Police District 3, is another way that we fight this fight together. Over the last 2 years, we have responded to roughly 10,000 calls for service. I think that's a win because victims of violence are speaking out. They're asking for help. On the scene of calls for domestic violence, sheriff's deputies, in the evaluation of the situation, use that judgment to make decisions on the spot as to whether one party should be removed from the residence or whether to make an arrest. It is the on-site domestic violence incident that our supplemental report becomes a critical tool in on-site domestic violence investigations. We use that form to conduct a thorough investigation, often taking photographs and gathering testimony intended to aid prosecution in a domestic violence case. For victims who may not know exactly how to get help quickly in a violent situation, they can call the 211 call center and be dispatched quickly to public safety communications to have law enforcement respond where they are victims of domestic violence. Of course, as you know, 911 is still the best way to reach county or municipal police, but those calls can easily be directed by 211. Finally, we think the service our special victims assistance perform adds a dimension that uniquely changes our relationship with victims on a very human level. It changes in this way. Victims have access to our special victims assistance at our headquarters, at both courthouses, where they can get information about how to access the court process and can be directed to other resources. Secondly, we are used to asking citizens in need of services whether they have made contact for that assistance. But if you've never been a victim of domestic violence, in fact, never expected to ever be a victim, where to get help or assistance is simply not information you have at your fingertips. So, making service availability apparent is critical. Fear, shame, or simply not knowing can keep a victim from taking action. That's why our SVAs flip the script, if you will. When deputies respond to 911 calls and in the course of their investigation and completing the supplemental report determine that the victim is at risk, the report goes directly to our SVAs, who reach out to the victims within 24 hours to see what assistance, advice, or direction the person may need in the aftermath of a domestic violence incident. We believe it is easier and more likely that a victim will respond to an offer of assistance than trying to locate the right person or agency after they have experienced violence on their own. There are two other ways in particular I want to mention that the Sheriff's Office and our deputies are available to citizens who may be victims of domestic violence. There are services we provide routinely. The first is what is called a standby. A standby occurs when deputies monitor access to a residence, when one person has left a residence for their safety and needs to return to that residence to acquire items necessary for their livelihood. And relations in those cases are so strained that the presence of law enforcement is required. The second is when deputies monitor the safe transfer of children between estranged parties before and after parental visitation. That brings to mind the other aspect of domestic violence that is occasionally overlooked. Children are often the silent and unseen victims of domestic violence. We like to think that residents have our phone number at the ready. But when that isn't the case, 211 is another important tool in the fight against domestic violence. It can get a victim to any and all of the many services that are available to help a victim break the cycle and move the victim to a survivor. At this time, it's my honor and pleasure to call to the podium an important partner in this effort to fight domestic violence, our Honorable State's Attorney, Ms. Angela Alsabrook.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. And I wanted to say thank you to each of you for being here this morning. I especially want to thank my partners in law enforcement for the important work that they do. I know that you've heard some about the success that we've had so far this morning, but I just want to take a moment to say how truly remarkable it is. I want to thank all of the various law enforcement partners who are with us this morning. Chief McGaw talked about the 15% reduction in violent crime, which is no small feat. That we've worked on together, and we've experienced 11%, I believe, overall. And so although our numbers are headed in the right direction, one of the things that we have been most concerned about, and we've had an opportunity to talk about with Sheriff High and also with the county executive, is that we've noticed that our numbers are remaining steady, unfortunately, in the family. And so although we're seeing violent crime going down, we are noticing that violence is steady in our families. And so this morning, although we have experienced these declines, and we're proud of the declines that we have experienced, because one of the things the chief hasn't said is that these numbers, I believe that nationally the numbers are about 6% or 7%. And so we are more than double in terms of our declines. And so we have done quite well in Prince George's County. But we are never complacent. And not especially when we find that the violence is occurring in our families. Our families are the foundation of our community. And domestic violence is shaking loose that foundation. And we are ever cognizant of that. We're talking about women. We're talking about children. We're talking about whole families that are affected. And so we are not happy to stand and to be complacent with the numbers when we see what is happening in our families. Domestic violence is disruptive. it is destructive. And we notice in the lives of women like Sarita Thompson, who was abused by her child's father, and as a result of that abuse destroyed her apartment, destroyed the home that they shared together. And after that destruction occurred, she found that she was going to be evicted. She and her child would be evicted if they didn't have the funding to put back together the home. And so domestic violence affects not only the women, but affects these children who live in the home as well. It is destructive to lives of people like Yvette Cade, who I want to thank for being present here today with us. And in case nobody has said it to Yvette, you look so beautiful this morning. But Yvette, we want to just thank her for her courage. She's used her voice not only to speak about her own story, but to empower other women. And we want to say thank you for being here and say thank you for your courage. 211 is so important. It really is. And I've been joined by my partner here in crime, our county executive, who I also want to say thank you so much to. But 211 is so important. I've heard so many people say, well, why do we need 211? Don't we have 911? But the point of it is we will not stop. We will bring every resource to bear to fight this terrible epidemic is essentially what it is. And so there's never too much, never too much. And what 211 does is allows us to reach more victims. And one of the things that's very important about 211, and I think we can't overlook this point, is that we would like not only victims of violence to access this line and call, but for those neighbors who may be aware of violence occurring in a household in your neighborhood, for that child who's aware that there's violence occurring in the home. And so this number is not exclusive to those who are suffering the violence, but we want to make it possible to have more and more avenues for citizens to reach us and to get that important information to us by calling 211. Not only that, but there's another angle to this, and that is that those who are abusers, and this is a very different point that we need to make. For those who are abusers, this line makes it possible as well for them to receive help. One of the things that we have discussed as a group is that if we only target the women who are involved in these violent situations, then we're only targeting half. That's half a solution. We want to make it known as well for those who are feeling desperate, those abusers who are feeling that they just need some help. Those individuals can access 211 as well and be taken to resources. We are not in a position to simply react to crime. We are in the business of preventing crime. And so for those who are desperate, who are feeling pinched and pushed, what we've seen in the homicides that occurred this year is many of the abusers who have been involved in these cases were never, ever involved in the criminal justice system before. This is the first time that we are seeing them. And so we want to make sure that we make it possible for those people to come and to receive help as well before the violence occurs. So prevention is extremely important. One other point I want to mention is that we have to do as much as we can, not only to prevent the crime, but to make sure that we help people put their lives back together after the crime has occurred. We spend a lot of time talking about reentry for those who have committed a crime, but what about those who have suffered the devastation of a crime? And so we want to make sure that we have resources for them as well. And so this Saturday, October 19th, we have a Victims Crime Fund Run that is occurring in College Park. We have information about that run, but it starts at 7:30 in the morning. Our very own county executive always comes out. We have a little competition, comes out to run in that with us as well. But that raises money for victims, and we have resources for people like Sarita Thompson, who will come to us for that fund, who will need to repair locks in the house. And there are so many other expenses that victims just don't have the money for. And so we encourage folks to come out for that as well. So again, I just want to say thank you to all of you all for being here. Again, this is an extremely important resource. And again, the point of it is we are not going to sit back and wait for these crimes to occur. We are on the front end of it. We're preventing it. 211 is important. We encourage you to get the word out to everybody. Like we said, neighbors should be accessing this line. We want children to access the line, the victims to be able to access the line, and those who are abusers or would-be abusers to be able to access it as well. And so now I have the pleasure. I want to thank, before I do that, a couple of people too. We have Deputy State's Attorney Ann Wagner Stewart, who is here with us this morning. I know I saw Ada Clark-Edwards, who is leading our domestic violence unit as well. They do an absolutely phenomenal job in fighting these cases, trying the tough cases every day. I want to thank them and acknowledge them. And then I want to acknowledge and thank our county executive, who I have to tell you is the best crime-fighting partner anywhere, who has really put his values to work, who has funded us, who's met with us as a partner, and who feels, as we do, that these crimes are very personal crimes. As you've heard, children are very often the silent victims, the invisible victims of domestic violence. This is destructive to our family. We want to thank the county executive for his leadership and for putting together this program and so many that we know will have an impact on our community. So at this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you County Executive Rushern Baker.
Before the county executive comes up, let me just introduce two people. Senator Victor Ramirez, where you at? Thank you for coming, and Delegate Ann Healy. Thank you for coming. Yeah, we already. And at this time, I want to introduce our county executive, my boss. And you know, one thing I forgot to say, I'm the moderator and didn't even tell you who I was. I'm Barry Stanton, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Public Safety for Prince George's County. So now, Rushern L. Baker is coming to the podium.
Now, Barry, I don't know how you misintroducing yourself. I mean, you've got like the best team there is. You should be like really out there. Let me just say this, and I know everyone has talked about, and I'm going to emphasize the 211 and the launch of this campaign. But the state's attorney, who is phenomenal and doing a great job, and we in the county are so blessed to have her, mentioned that I pulled this team together, and I appreciate that credit. But really, the county is blessed to have not only a great state's attorney who feels passionately about of this community, about our children, about people who are in need. And she's just great, and she's the one that badgers us all every day to put these things on the front burner, not the back burner. And so I'd like to give her another round of applause, please. And certainly her real partner in crime, who's doing this, is our sheriff. Melvin came in and not only lent his talent to Prince George's, his experience, but his office, and he's been a tremendous partner. We couldn't have made any of these strides. I think if you talk to the police chief, he'll tell you that. Talk to Barry, he'll tell you that. Talk to the fire chief and corrections, they'll tell you that. But what a phenomenal individual he is. Our sheriff, Melvin Let's give him another round of applause. And what can I say about Ms. Cade? I had the pleasure during the campaign of watching her speak at an event, and was so moved. And I was so glad that I had my daughter with me, my middle child, because it reminded me during her speech Ms. Cade was giving that day of the things that my wife taught not only our kids but taught me, and the sacrifices that people make and the struggles they go through, and how they take those struggles, and they turn them into positive action, and she has done that. Can we give her a round of applause again? Finally, let me just say a couple of things of why this is so important and why we're kicking it off. As we watch our crime numbers go down, and we watch the great work, the police chief and the men and women out here, those who are wearing purple, once again, I missed the memo, but the dedication they have in making sure that we're doing everything that we can to get the word out. We looked at it as they were doing a briefing for us. We looked at the numbers, and I asked the question, how many times that individual that committed the violence, how many times had they interacted with our criminal justice system? And the answer, as the state's attorney said, in a number of those cases was zero. 0 times of them interacting with our criminal justice system. But at some point, they interacted with health services, family services, our school system. At some point, there was a signal we missed. There was a signal we missed. That is what this is about. It is about making sure we don't miss that signal. It's not just the police. It's not just the sheriff. It's not just the state's attorney. It is our health department. It is family services. It is every facet of our government and social life. This is a religious issue. This is a family issue. This is a moral issue. All of us are intimately involved. I don't want us to miss those signals. Transforming neighborhoods is about touching lives where they are and making them better. Not going in and doing surface work. It's understanding the individuals and what they go through. That's what this is about. We can make sure we prevent these crimes by getting help to both the victims and those who are abusers. Let me close with this before I bring up the next gentleman. Many people know I grew up on a military base. And during that time, in the 60s, during the Vietnam War, people were not only, we were in Fort Bragg, people were not only dying in Vietnam, but they were dying when they came back. Not physically dying, emotionally dying. And so what we started to see on base was men who were coming back from the war, who were committing some crimes to their family, because they were dealing with emotional scars. They weren't going out robbing. They weren't going out shooting people outside, but they were abusing people inside the homes because they were hurting themselves. What it said to us, if we want to solve that problem, what it said to those of us who were children who watched people we loved, men who were good folks, come back and do horrible things, is that the help that they needed, they weren't getting. Well, we're going to start giving them help. We're going to start getting a community around, and this will kick it off. It is my pleasure to introduce Tim Jansen, who's going to make sure that when you call the 211, not 911, that we help you. Tim, please.
I was a little nervous there that I got a promotion I wasn't expecting. It is my pleasure to be here today to tell you a little about 211, but the thing that was striking me as I was sitting here is I'm a nearly lifelong Prince George's County resident, having moved here when I was 6. And there's a great amount of pride in our county executive, our state's attorney, our police department and sheriff department, our local elected officials, and some of our partners at Community Crisis Services, the Department of Family Services, the Department of Social Services, the Health Department, in seeing people come together to really make a difference. Because as my staff would tell you, it's all about starting with the first call and the first caller. Because all of this is great, but if I can't get a phone answered and I can't get somebody to provide that service, all of this is rather pointless. And so what 211 provides, 211 is one hotline out of 15 that we answer at Community Crisis Services, where we've been answering hotlines for 43 years. It is a line that's been around for about 10 years. It is statewide. There are 211s throughout the country. We were kind of on the forefront in Maryland introducing 211. 211 is that single point of access with 3 digits that you dial, a 2, a 1, and a 1. So that you don't have a long number to remember, you just dial 211. As someone who dials that number, what you get is connected to a trained hotline specialist that's trained in crisis intervention and referral, but most importantly, listening and trying to figure out what the best steps are to help somebody from where they start. Because we don't all start in these situations in the same place. The key to all of this is not just intervention when there's a domestic violence incident going on, but there's prevention. When things start to go wrong, picking up the phone and making that all-important call just to say, this doesn't feel right. Is there something I could do? What are the resources out there? We're lucky in our county. We have a lot of resources. Do we have everything that we need? No, but you probably never could have everything that you need. What you do have are a variety of resources for domestic violence that 211 call specialists will link people to when they call, up to and including court orders for protective orders, up to and including warm transfers to 911. I can't underscore how important it is to say to somebody, hold on a second, I'm going to bring 911 on the phone, as opposed to, oh, well, just call 911. What we've discovered over time is people don't make that call. So we want to make sure we're linking folks appropriately. Same thing with the resource. If I need to link you to the domestic violence shelter, I'm going to put you on hold. I'm going to call that shelter. I'm going to warm transfer you so that you get a live body right away that has a little bit of your background. Hopefully, we need few of those, and much of what we're doing is just the prevention piece. What do I need to do? Where are some educational resources? Where are some legal resources? Those sorts of things. Unfortunately, we do have situations that require protective orders, do require placements into our domestic violence shelter. 211 has worked very closely with the Family Crisis Center, our domestic violence shelter, to ensure that we have a protocol in place to help everyone. And Family Crisis is working very diligently never to have an empty bed. And hopefully we get to the point where we don't need any of those beds, which would ultimately be our goal. One of the things we bring at Community Crisis Services to 211 is we're also the single point of access for homeless individuals. So the homeless hotline rings in my shop. So when somebody calls because they haven't seen these wonderful kind of public service announcements, they're just calling about being homeless, we can link them through the homeless hotline. We see those kinds of calls every day. We're fortunate to be able to do this kind of work. Our partners at the Department of Family Services and the Department of Social Services really are there to help us each and every step of the way. Make sure we're starting where the client is. We're starting where that caller is. One of my social work students this morning said, "What do you mean when you say start where the caller is?" And I said, "Really? Start where the caller is. Don't put your situation in front of them. Don't put your values and your ethics and your morals in front of them. Start where they are." Lots of times when we get into these situations, we've made bad choices. We've all made bad choices. The idea is, how do we move forward to making additional choices that benefit and keep us strong and healthy? One of the things that our state's attorney was mentioning is it's the children. It's the victims of intimate partner violence. Those are calls that we can take every day and talk about how do we get you connected, either through your school or a community resource. One of the beautiful things about 211 is there is a database of over 7,000 resources statewide. And I'm fortunate to have very good relationships with folks around the state. So if I need to move somebody around the state, I can move them to the Eastern Shore if that's where they need to be safe. At the end of the day, it's about safety. It's about utilizing 211 to ensure that folks are safe. Part of that safety includes the occasional time when somebody who's a victim of domestic violence is having thoughts of suicide. Suicide as it relates to domestic violence is significant. Those statistics are a little scary. One of the things at 211 is every crisis intervention specialist that's answering the phone is trained in the SAMHSA best practice of ASSIST, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills. It is the only best practice that we have. And so they come to the table with those kinds of skills. And so I'm really hoping the phone doesn't need to ring. Unfortunately, in this kind of situation, it is going to ring. And we're there as a ready, willing, and able partner. And I'd like to just thank all of these folks for everything they've done to bring us to the table. We're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days every year. Daytime, nighttime, Saturday too, for those of you who've been around long enough to remember that. So I'd like to close by just saying thank you to everyone. If you want information about 211, we're here, and I'm glad to walk anybody through what else 211 could do for you. So at this time, it's my pleasure to invite up Arleen Joell, the President and CEO of Community Advocates for Family and Youth.
Let me just say, I'm just proud to be a victim service provider today, because the one thing that the 211 does for us is it shows our community that there's a consolidated effort from our government all the way down to community organizations, that we're here to help them if they speak out and stand up and take an action to put themselves into safety. And I'm so glad to be a part of it. Now, the 211 is going to be so important, because when someone is ready to act, we have to be ready to take that step. And I just want to share one example with you today about, we'll call the person Tracy, because Tracy was ready to leave. And we all know that everyone that calls 911 isn't ready to leave, but we need to be there when they are. So in this particular situation, her and her son, they were ready to go, right? And so the first thing that we had to do was meet her where she was, like Tim Jansen said. And so we did. What did she want to do? File an emergency protective order. Did she have transportation? No. So we had to make sure that she got transportation to there, right? While she was going there, the next thing was to call Family Crisis Center to say, okay, do you have a place for her and her son if she gets her emergency protective order? Now, in this case, she went to live with her parents. Now, parents' home is not always the safest place, right? Because the abuser is very familiar with that, right? But in our case, she did. She got her emergency protective order. But what comes next? VINE, Victim Information Notification every day. She needs to be notified when that person is served because her risk goes up 75%. So we had to do that. And then in partnership with the state's attorney's office, because there was an arrest made, yay, right? And so, but she needs knowledge in terms of what to expect when she does go to court, or even to before the final protective order hearing. She needs to be talking about home maintenance, child custody, child visitation, all those things that are going to keep her out of harm's way. And that's what community agencies do for victims, right? So the next thing is preparing her for trial. And so we do have a court education program so people know what to expect when they go to court, or they're able to invoke some response from the judge or the jury so they really understand her story, right? Well, in our case, good story, long story short, the person was convicted, got 5 years and 5 years backup time. But what Tracy reminded me of the other day, it took 2 tries. Hung jury the first time. But that hung jury motivated her because she was even more determined at that point to do it again so that she could hold her offender accountable. Great story, right? And those are the ones that we want to hear. But we know that there are so many people in harm's way, and that's just one of them. But what the 211's going to do, it's going to show our community that from the government all the way to all of the victim services that are in Prince George's County, we are strong in numbers. And so we can now really take a stand and encourage people. If you come out, if you share your story, all of us are here to help you. And so I'm just proud to be a part of it. And Kathy is certainly committed to being a part of the solution, and we're certainly ready to work on it. So I'm just pleased to introduce Yvette Cade to share her testimony.
Good morning. So many times I have not listened to God, but I have to put him first. I'm going to read this piece that I wrote in the AM. God moves me in the morning, and I pay attention. Your dreams are invaluable. I'm a queen of my domain. I've been raised to have a sense of pride, nobleness, and courage about myself. I should not be buried by my pain. I'm allowed to live out loud. The desires of my heart shall not be denied. Who I aspire to be shall be determined by me. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. Being self-confident to be an incredible, unique me. I'm just so glad that you all are here, giving a voice and a face to victims, because so many times we feel alone. We feel like our opinion does not matter, and we suffer in silence. I just want to thank you all. I was a victim of domestic violence. As a teenager, I was a victim of date rape, sexual assault, and bullying. I was bullied because I was shy. I was taken advantage of. Excuse me. I'm just so thankful for these services that are in Prince George's County. And it overjoys me that 211 is in place, because if they had 211 for me, when I was going through, I would not be where I'm at. I didn't know that there were resources to help me, because I'm a family-oriented person, and I was taught that you go to your family for what you need. I didn't know it was people out there to help me. And then ultimately, there was a voice inside of me that said, you can't do it alone. Your family doesn't understand, but there are other people out there that do understand, that are willing to help. Law enforcement is not the enemy. They are there to help within the community. The House of Ruth and different shelters are out there for you. Although there was a time that I needed shelter, and I hear people laugh and say there's more shelter for pets than people. I was in a dangerous situation. I tried to flee from the home with my daughter. There was nowhere for me to go. But these services that they've talked about today, Prince George's County has now opened up and centralized a domestic violence unit. That's very encouraging to me as a victim, because now you can talk to one detective. The detective that covered my case, many of you know my story. My ex-husband, after 10 months of separation, came to my job and set me on fire because I wanted nothing to do with him. It destroyed my life. But so many things have changed within this community, and you should be proud. You should be thankful that there are people out here who are willing to reach out and help. My plan got destroyed. I was supposed to read this speech, but all I can say is that I'm thankful that people actually care about the victims. I read that poem because I wanted to move a victim and touch an abuser. There are so many people that walk up to me because I've shared my testimony. They say I'm a hero, I have courage. I don't feel that I'm any of that. I'm just me. Thank you. I'm sorry, but it just tears me up inside that I'm still fighting after 8 years to rebuild a life for me and my daughter. I had my career going for me. And because all I wanted to do was support my family, be a woman of God, it was taken away from me. Thank you.
You're good. All right. Great job.
Thank you.
We love you.
Wow. That's all I can say from victim to winner. Yvette Cade. Let's give her a round of applause. Consolidated services, government working together, from public safety to health and human services to our victim services. Today, stop the silence. Today, stop the silence. If all of us can please stand up here, please. And could everyone stand? We want to say 3 times, stop the silence. Repeat after me. Stop the silence. Again. Stop the silence. One more time.